Hey there, global citizens. Welcome back to the Global Talks, your podcast dedicated to uncovering the joys and challenges of global citizens. My name is Gisani, and I am with Global Citizen Solutions, a boutique investment migration consultancy firm helping expats to find their ideal citizenship by investment program outside their birth country. So, on the topic today, the number of Americans residing in Portugal rose by 45% in 2021 from the previous year, according to government data. And it's not hard to see why. Americans looking overseas to set up a company, to work remotely, or simply to enjoy a better quality of life could possibly find no better place than Portugal. The sunny country perched on the Iberian Peninsula is perhaps the closest to California that you can get. Plus, the welcoming locals, excellent schools, healthcare, and infrastructure are additional bonuses to those venturing abroad. But, relocating to another country is much more than just buying a one-way flight to the other side of the pond. And if you already have started searching for visas, cost of living, or how to bring a pet, or what the heck is a vinho verde, we hope this episode will help you in your research. So joining us today are two remarkable ladies who moved from the USA to Portugal and have lots of tips to share. Georgina Miranda, CEO of She Ventures. She moved from LA to lovely Graça, which is a charming neighborhood in Lisbon, after spending some time in Holland and Italy. Also joining us online from Porto is wine importer Ayessa Priego, who will share the best tips on Portuguese wines and also her journey from Santa Monica to Portugal. Ayessa and Georgina, welcome. So now, are you, Ayessa and Georgina, are you ready to talk about Portugal?
Yes.
Okay, so the first question is, what brought you to Portugal? Do you want to start?
Sure.
From Porto?
So I can say it was a happy mistake. I always loved Portugal, and I wanted in the future to retire or spend some time, maybe half the time in Europe and half the time in the US. However, at the beginning of COVID, when everything started, I was happily stuck. I have a ticket just for about 3 weeks to come to Porto. And literally 5 days after I landed in Porto, they declared the pandemic and I was stuck. There were no flights. So as we all remember, it's a very scary time for all of us, full of uncertainty. And all of a sudden, there was no flights. All of a sudden, you're looking at 50-hour flights with layovers, planes canceling. So I was like, no, thank you, I'll stay here. It's a beautiful place to get stuck. And since then, I've never really looked back. And that's kind of the story. So it was kind of like happily stuck, I call it, but that was my story. And from there, immediately, as soon as I heard, of course, immediately have to buy a TV, a bed, because I didn't have anything. So it was like, oh my God, what do I do now, right? The world's closing. I'm in Porto. What am I going to do? So I made that choice of staying, and I'm very happy that I made that choice.
Good. And then, so just tell me more about your background and your work as well. So I kind of get a better understanding of your life now in Portugal.
So I'm from Los Angeles, and I've been there for a long time. And I always did work with Porto. I started importing wine into the United States, mainly California to begin. And that was based because the first time I came to Porto, I fell in love. I fell in love with the culture, the people, the cuisine, of course, the wines. And I noticed that there was an opportunity in California to start selling wines. No one really knew what Portuguese wines really were. So I decided to start my company. And that's when I started bringing the connections, coming back and forth to Portugal. And that's when I started. And that's the reason why I knew Porto so well. So that's basically what I do now. As an owner, I started changing my ways to work. And that's when I decided maybe I want to spend half of the time in Europe, half of the time in Los Angeles, right? So that's the way I set it up.
Okay, that seems like it's a perfect balance of time spent there and here. And did you also find, I'm going to jump onto Georgina now, but I'm very curious. You said that people back home, they didn't know much about Portuguese wine. So what wines were they familiar with only when they associated with Portugal? Just port or not even that?
Not even that. It's very interesting. But I remember as soon as I came back from my first trip to Portugal, I went to the wine shop. So I wanted to find these great wines. And literally, I go to a very famous, well-known wine shop. And Portuguese wines was in the South America region. I was like, oh my God, there's so much work to do. People don't really know. So you find some Vino Verdes, maybe some port, but very, very limited. I mean, we have Napa Valley in our backyard, right? So that's the main wines that we drink. We also have Spain, Spain, Italy, France, the usual ones, right? So I saw an opportunity, and I always believed, and you're talking about 8 years ago, that this country, it was just a matter of time that they were going to be discovered, right? And it needed to be promoted for the food, for the cuisine, the wines. And now we see it, as you were mentioning, 45% are moving to Portugal. And you see it more and more because of the quality of life. The quality of life that you get is very important. I'm from Los Angeles, and you do a very nice quality of life, but it's very interesting because you get kind of soaked in the work life. It's very easy. It's very easy to do that. And what you find here, and what I found, is that you see the balance here. It's a work-life balance, family, which is very important as well here in Portugal. So at one point, you start making these hard questions to yourself, and you're like, how do I want to live the next 5, 10, even 20 years of my life, right? Do I really want to be stuck in this race that you're constantly on the go, and this, that, and it's great, right? But at one point, do you really want to enjoy life? And this is the one, if I'm to say what was the main differentiator, is the quality of life that Portuguese really know. And the balance is very, very important. And that comes down with health and lifestyle. And I think what happened with the pandemic speed everything up for the whole world, kind of just gearing towards that, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point that you brought up. And I think, Georgina, you're correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you moving to Portugal was also powered by the pandemic, yeah? Do you want to share with us a story?
Sure. I had a reverse situation of getting stuck. I actually got stuck in the US because I was already splitting my time between Europe and the US. I started that process since 2018. I lived in Holland. They have a Dutch-American Friendship Treaty Visa for entrepreneurs. And so when I'd been wanting to move overseas for a long time, and I always worked internationally as a consultant. And so that seemed like the most straightforward path to start my journey in Europe, and that's why I went there first. So I was back in the States January 2020 for a client, and I planned to be there for 6 weeks to also enjoy ski season in Colorado. And the pandemic hit, and then I couldn't leave. And the Dutch government didn't let me fly back to renew my visa, which would have been good for another 2 years. And so I had to wait 7 months. And Portugal had always been on the radar for me because when I decided to go to Netherlands first, it was actually between Netherlands and Portugal. But the process seemed much more straightforward in Netherlands. And there was already a treaty in place with the US. So I went that path. And but as soon as Portugal opened for business meetings, then I just set up meetings in Porto and Lisbon. I figured whichever one I got meetings in, that's where I was moving to. And
that's a good strategy.
I had only been to Lisbon once before for Web Summit in 2016, and I'd never been to Porto. And then I got meetings with the Porto School of Business, and then I said, well, I guess I'm going to Porto then.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I started my journey in Porto. That's where I started. I lived there for 7 months.
But now you're in Lisbon.
Yes.
Okay, so, but tell me, what do you do? What's your, tell us more about your background so we can understand how you moved from Porto, now you are in Lisbon, and how that worked out for you.
Sure. So I'm a social entrepreneur. My company's called She Ventures, and then I also have a business under my own brand, Georgina Miranda. LLC. And I'm a consultant, a coach, a writer, a speaker, and my background's in management consulting and various startups. So I've always worked with companies all over the world, leaders all over the world, training and teaching on leadership, strategy execution, now conscious leadership. I also teach mindfulness at work. And with startups, I mentor them, coach them to kind of get from their starting point to their growth stage. And so that allows me to have a lot of flexibility where I work. And well, pre-pandemic, events were a really important part of my work. So now that's coming back, thank goodness. But during the pandemic, everything was virtual. So it created another layer of opportunity to have more flexibility. But I also plan to split my time between Europe and the US. And that's kind of the schedule I've kept since 2018. So I just plan my year accordingly as to where I'm needed. And I'm really happy to have the balance.
No, I'm glad you two have a lifestyle that seems to suit a lot of entrepreneurs and I don't want to say digital nomads, but people that work outside of the format of a 9 to 5. They run their own business, so it's good to have the flexibility to be here and there. But then I think I have to ask a question which is very annoying. Not a lot of people want to answer, but people are watching this show and they are doing their research and find out how they can move from the US to Portugal. What do you do with regards to the visa? Did you apply for a particular visa here, Georgina?
Yeah, so when I arrived in Portugal, so there's different ways of applying for the visa. You can apply, and I've been told it's much faster to do it from home. But given my situation, and that was in the middle of the pandemic, and all the offices were actually closed, I didn't really trust that was going to be a faster route. So there's a way to apply in country. And so once I was in Portugal, because I was allowed to enter for business meetings, I applied I initially applied for independent worker visa residency. And then after 3 months of waiting and not hearing anything, I managed to get through to SEF, and the one kind person at SEF that I've met, she advised me to change my application and hire a lawyer and applied for a highly skilled residency.
Oh, wow. Nice advice that you got there.
Yeah, because if I went the other route, it was only going to be good for 1 year periods at a time. And apparently it's the slowest application that's visited. And so she said if I applied for highly skilled, I could get an appointment sooner with SEF. And the first visa was good for 2 years, and then renewable for 3. And then after that, I can apply for a second passport. So I did all that. I got my appointment. I think that call was in January of 2021. And I got an appointment for February that same year, which was like miraculous.
Wow.
But then because of COVID, all their offices shut down like 2 days before my appointment. And then I didn't actually get to the appointment till end of July that year. And I didn't actually have the card in my hand until December of 2021. Yeah, it's just to give people, there's of course, everyone has a different situation. And I just encourage people to have a lot of patience and really do your homework if you don't hire a lawyer. So the lawyer basically helped me get the appointment because I wasn't getting through the phone system. And I handled the appointment by myself, the application process. I had them review everything, but I went in there, and I'd encourage you to bring somebody to your self-appointment. It was pretty ruthless.
Well done for doing that all on your own. You do, just to clarify, SEF is, so if anyone's doing research now, it's SEF. It's the, help me here, production, it's the Department of Foreign Services. Foreign Services, okay, great. And we will leave a link if you want to do your research. How about you, Ayessa? Can you share with us your experience?